slowest ebb, what we've seen through this process is the Parliament at its best. People working across party lines in the national interest, and I want to pay tribute to all of my fellow MPs gathered here today who have shown leadership, who have decided to put aside their partisan squabbles and to recognise that what we need to do is to begin legislating in the interests of all Australians. This is a resounding result, and we are so proud to be standing here today with such an emphatic result that says yes to love and yes to equality. I just finished by saying I spoke to my two young boys last night and they asked me if we were voting on anything. And I said, well, soon we'll be voting on who can marry each other. I said, we'll be voting on whether boys can marry boys and girls can marry girls. My young boy said, can't they do that already? I said, no, they can't, but we're going to change that. Of course, the youngest boy said, great, I'm going to marry Jessie. So this is a great result for not just the people standing here, not just those communities who have experienced discrimination, but for young people, for future generations who will now no longer have to walk in a society that says to them that their love is different to the love that other people experience. We're very proud, and now the job of this Parliament is to get on and legislate, to recognise that Australians today said no to discrimination, and any legislation that comes before this Parliament needs to ensure that we respect that and that this bill can't be used as a Trojan horse to entrench discrimination. Thank you.
Well, today I want to say thank you to Australia, but a particular thanks to everybody who has campaigned their hearts out for this yes result. As a member of the LGBTI community myself, I know that this has not always been easy. It's been hard to go head to head with the No campaign on many of the things that have been said about our lives and our families. But Australia has responded with resounding support for us and our community, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. We wouldn't be here today though if it weren't for the fact that there are many lesbian and gay people in our community, and many who are long gone, who campaigned for lesbian and gay rights in much, much harder times, when it was criminal to be gay or lesbian, and when our identities were entirely stigmatised. So I want to say thank you to those brave people from decades past, because we would not be here today without you. Thank you.
Well, I was at a marriage equality rally in Adelaide last month, and while I was there, I saw a woman holding up a sign, and it said, I wasn't going to ask her father, now I have to ask the whole country. Well, to that woman and her partner, and to all the other gay and lesbian partners out there, guess what? The country said yes.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who voted yes, who voted for equality, for respect, for fairness, and above all, for love. And I want to say thank you to my fellow members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex and queer community who have been put through a lot in the last 2 months. It has been a really difficult process having their human rights put to a public vote, and to at least know, having got to the end of it, that it was worth it. We shouldn't have had to have been put through this process, but we've got through it, and now it's so wonderful to know that we've got the overwhelming support of the Australian community. Now, I know through my marriage to Penny, 31 years of being married, that in fact this result isn't going to change it. We're going to stay married, but it means that others can join us. And I know that, you know, from Penny's and my marriage, just how there's no difference between a heterosexual marriage and a same-sex marriage. And I know how much it means to people, all people, you know, lesbian, gay, but the bisexual, the intersex community, the trans and the gender diverse community as well, to know that they are being valued, they are being respected, their love is being celebrated just like anybody else, and that's a wonderful thing. And I'm really looking forward to continuing the cross-party work. It's been a real highlight of my time in the Senate to be working with the team that has got there's our Senate inquiry up and now have been working together. We've now got this cross-party legislation and getting it through the Senate in the next few weeks, and really so we can achieve this magnificent change for Australia.
Just one more. Well, last and certainly in this company least, most certainly, I stand here as a person who believed that marriage between a man and a woman, because it just was. And it wasn't until 10 years ago that I realised that my argument supporting that premise was so shallow that it was no argument at all. And that's when I changed my mind. I say to the gay community what I said to Senator Wong 4 minutes before, as those long 4 minutes ticked by. I said to her, it's a disgrace that we're even here, that your lives are being judged by other people who have no right to decide how you live your life. But now, thankfully, Australia has endorsed your lives. All I will say now is that a quote from when New Zealand voted in favour of same-sex marriage equality 4 years ago, the morning after, my heterosexual brother said, New Zealand voted for same-sex marriage last night. The sun came up this morning and my life didn't change one little bit. Thank you.
Starting for you this morning after the results.
There's been lots of SMSs and I'm sure there's been lots of phone calls, and you'll excuse me if I've not checked my phone. I do have a number of phone numbers though, but as far as I'm aware, no.
Senator Smith, I'll start with you, but it's actually a question for all of you. Matthias Cormann at that press conference with the Prime Minister a moment ago made it very clear that he thinks that your bill should be amended in order to strengthen religious protections. Do you agree with that position? And the question is for the group, at what stage does amendments to your cross-party bill mean that the bill gets sunk?
I'll start with that if I may. I've not seen Senator Cormann's comments, but when the government established a process on which to deal with this, which included the Australian Postal Survey, it made it very, very clear that they would be free votes that would govern the management of this issue and the substantive issues around how amendments would be included. Whether amendments to the bill are included requires the support of not just one parliamentarian, not even 5 parliamentarians, but parliamentarians across the Senate in the first instance, and perhaps even across the House of Representatives. If there are amendments, let's see them early. But let's be very clear about this. Australians did not participate in a survey to have one discrimination plank removed, to have other planks of discrimination piled upon them. They said no. They said no clearly. For those that were paying particular attention to the detail, they saw a bill that was sensible, that was fair, that was on the public record for 3 months, that was born out of a Senate committee process, that has at its core transparency. It is a sensible, fair way. It is a starting point, but amendments must be agreed not by 1, not by 5, but by the Parliament.
First, as a matter of process, if we are successful in the motion we've jointly moved today, we will commence the second reading of the debate tomorrow, of the bill tomorrow. We won't move to the committee stage till we return to Parliament in the next sitting period, which is, as you would know, Catherine, when committee stage will consider amendments. I would make a couple of points about amendments. The first is, as Dean also referenced, Australians voted for equality. Australians did not vote to licence more discrimination. And certainly I can speak for myself, that's the basis on which I will be considering amendments. The second thing I would say is this, it would be, I think Australians would look very unkindly upon people who seek to move amendments that they know are about trying to sink the bill. Because that would be, I think, a breach of faith with the Australian people and the result that's been announced today.
Dean Smith, Penny Wong and other senators, the ball will be in their court in the Senate chamber very soon, in fact, now that we have the result of the postal survey. Dean Smith, a pivotal player, really, the postal survey and same-sex marriage as an issue, maketh the man politically. He has explored new frontiers of his own personal politics, going to rallies, which he's not particularly comfortable with, he acknowledged, to try and support the Yes campaign. And now it'll be up to him and fellow senators to try to turn the will of the Australian nation into legislation. References there in that media conference or doorstop by the senators to Matthias Cormann, Cabinet Minister, and also very critical in the process of getting us to where we are today. And Matthias Cormann joins us in the studio now. So, Senator, you've made your view very clear in the media conference with the Prime Minister about what happens next. Talk to us about the timeline. How does this move forward through the Senate and then the House?
Well, as the government has said from the outset, if there's a yes outcome, and of course there is an emphatic yes outcome, then the government would facilitate consideration of a private member's bill to change the law to allow same-sex couples to marry. And there's a motion on the notice paper in the Senate today, which is due to be considered this afternoon, which I would expect to get up, which means the Smith bill, so-called, will be introduced into the Senate, and there'll be the beginning of the second reading debate tomorrow in the Senate. But the debate on the bill in detail will not happen until we come back after the next break. So the week of the 27th of November is the week that is broadly earmarked for debate on this bill in detail in the Senate. And as we've said right from the outset, the final sitting fortnight this year was the fortnight that we as a government had earmarked for consideration of this bill, both through the Senate and the House of Representatives. And we're essentially now acting in good faith with the decision of the Australian people, but also in good faith with what we said we would do in the context of this.
Now, you would have heard what Dean Smith said then. He described his bill as sensible, fair and born out of a Senate committee process. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, as I've said and as he has said, his bill is a starting point. There will now be a parliamentary process, and what I would like to think is that over the next few weeks, as we work our way through this, that people of goodwill from all around the chamber can come together and seek consensus. I mean, in the end, for any amendment to be successful, it has to have a majority.
I suppose we're trying to tease out your views on this particular bill. You're freed now from the process. We've got the result. We know you're from the Conservative wing of the Liberal Party. What's your view on it?
Well, I've always said that if the result of the survey process is yes, then I will be voting in favour of a bill to allow same-sex couples to marry. I mean, that is something that I've said since before the last election, so that is not news. But I've also said that, in my view, there will be a need to look carefully at the bill that is going to be before the Parliament to assess where the appropriate balance is. Across the Senate and across the Parliament as a whole over the next few weeks, and there'll be an outcome at the end of that process, and I'm very confident that it